Good evening. I would like to call to order this Anoka-Hennepin School Board meeting for today, March 24th, 2025. Please join the board in pledging our allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first order of business today is to approve the board agenda. Is there a motion to approve the board agenda as presented? Thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you. With a second from Director Audette. Any discussion? Hearing none.
I had something.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Jericho.
So I know this is last minute, but I would like to make a motion to add to the agenda an item to consider or to vote for whether or not we can adopt a B squad volleyball team for the district.
So I think first we have to vote on the because we have a motion and a second on the existing board agenda. So I think we'd have to vote on that, and then we could offer an amendment at that time.
Okay.
Any other discussion while we're in discussion from any board members on that action? Okay, no further discussion. Would all those in favor of approving the board agenda as motioned and seconded signify by saying aye?
Aye.
Would any opposed say nay? Okay, so 6 in favor and 0 opposed. The agenda is approved. And I think
So now,
Director Arco,
so now I make my motion to,
yes.
okay. Okay, I would like to make a motion to add an item to the agenda for the consideration or adoption of a B squad volleyball team in the district.
Okay, so board, there's a motion on the table to add an agenda item to the board agenda. Is there a second? Thank you, Director Audette. Any discussion? Director Arco.
So thank you for the quick opportunity to just kind of give my thoughts on this. So there's, I actually had thrown it out to Casey and Corey when we were discussing adding items to the agenda. I was totally prepared to let it just be, considered at a future agenda or a future board meeting, but it came to my attention that this is kind of the deadline for it, and if it doesn't happen, not saying that it will happen, of course, but if a B squad team were to be added, it would have to be added now, and it can't really wait till another board meeting, so I figured I would give it its moment in the light and just let us, talk about it or discuss it. So I normally would have waited, but like I said, there's a deadline looming, so that's why I motion to put it on right now, just to let the board make their decision. And then my quick thoughts on it are this, and this is kind of why I put it forward. I think everybody agrees sports are important, but of course we do have, budget considerations, so there's trade-offs. My understanding, I could skew the numbers here, but I believe Corey had estimated, tell me if I'm wrong, please, it was up to a $20,000 additional cost. Could be getting that number totally wrong. Just my quick take is in the grand scheme of things, I don't think $20,000 is a huge cost, and considering that we do have like a whole list of students who actively would join the team if it existed, I think that's at least a cost I'd be willing to pay for, because sports are very valuable in that it's builds teamwork, it's extracurricular, it's a engaging physical activity to do. There's just so many benefits that come from it, but I don't have to sell you on the benefits of sports. And just for consideration, so I know we had kind of had some internal discussion, and I'm not sure, I'm not 100% where every board member is. I'm fairly certain I know where every board member is, but while $20,000 would be an expense, if that number is correct, I do have confidence in Corey and his team if we so directed them to find that money somewhere else, in the same way that when we restructured the VSCs, they were able to find that money somewhere. So I don't think it would break the bank by any means or hurt anything. I think a non-human cost could be found. That's just my opinion. And then just something for the other board members to consider. I did vote, actually, I believe the vote was a 4-2 vote. So I voted with Director Simon, DeShane, and Langenfeld to temporarily, or at least for now, close the pool at Oakview Middle School. The savings that we got from that are far in excess of what adding the B squad volleyball team would be. So since I had voted with you guys, I guess my friendly request is please vote with me on this and just add the team to the district. So those are my thoughts.
So members, I think before us, we have a motion and a second to add an agenda item. The discussion at this point should be about anything related to adding that agenda item. If there is more to discuss, and then we can vote on that. And then once it comes up, I think if everyone kind of gives me the nod, I'll just put it at the end of the meeting, right? Like kind of tack it on at the end before we go into board correspondence and communication, should the vote pass. Any further discussion about adding this agenda item? Okay, members, hearing no further discussion, would all in favor of adding this agenda item say aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay? With 6 in favor and 0 opposed, that agenda item is now added to the end of the meeting. Thank you. All right, members, the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. As normal, members can remove items for separate consideration and discussion if that's their desire. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented? Thank you, Director Langenfeld. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Director Simon. Any discussion? Hearing none, would all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. 6 in favor and 0 opposed. The consent agenda is approved. Okay, members, our next agenda item is communications, delegations, and petitions. This is time for community members to provide input directly to the school board about issues that fall within our authority. Do we have any yellow cards from the community today? Okay. All right, so I will move us right along to our next agenda item. Board calendar and district update, so I will turn it over to Superintendent McIntyre.
All right, well, thank you, board members. And tonight, as usual, I'll be presenting some items of interest for the board and our community regarding activities and events that we're proud of in our district, and there's many again tonight. We do this to celebrate students, staff, and community members who are contributing to the accomplishment of our mission, which is to effectively educate each of our students for success. The Minnesota State High School League Winter State Tournaments are concluded with snowstorms and all, right? With strong success of our student athletes in numerous areas in our district. So to start things off, congratulations to our Andover High School boys hockey team for making their 5th state tournament appearance in school history to conclude this season. The Anoka High School girls and boys basketball teams each capped off successful seasons by qualifying for the state tournament as well. The girls team made their 5th state tournament appearance in school history, and the boys made their 9th overall appearance, but it's their first one since 1993. Coon Rapids High School once again served as the proud host of the Minnesota State High School League Adapted Floor Hockey Tournament held March 7th and 8th. The Anoka-Hennepin Mustangs qualified for this year's tournament in the PI division. Congratulations to the Mustangs on a successful season, and thank you to the Coon Rapids High School staff and all those involved for hosting another outstanding state tournament. Anoka-Hennepin was represented by 7 individuals in 3 relay teams at this year's Boys State Swimming Championships. Anoka High School's Dante Framke placed 10th in the 100-yard freestyle and 11th in the 100-yard backstroke. The Anoka High School 200-yard medley relay team of Dante Framke, Wesley Anderson, Levi Garberg, and Abe Olson placed 15th. Andover High School's Charles Noner placed 16th in the 1-meter diving. The state wrestling championships for boys and girls were held February 27th through March 1st at the Xcel Energy Center, and Anoka-Hennepin was represented by 13 student athletes at this year's state wrestling meet. So in the girls bracket, Blaine High School's Mandy Liu placed 5th in the 155 bracket. And in the boys areas, Anoka High School's Declan Dahl placed 5th at 107 pounds, while Jack Brennenstein of Coon Rapids High School placed 5th overall at 133 pounds. So congratulations to all of our student athletes and coaches on a successful winter season. The spring sports have already started, so we're looking forward to celebrating more as all 5 of our high schools begin those spring sports. Next, Blaine High School advanced to the Minnesota State High School Mathematics League Tournament held March 10th at Spring Lake Park High School. Sophomore team member Tayson Schofield also competed in the individual part of the event as well, scoring in the top 10 in the state. Math leagues and after-school activity with topics ranging from Algebra 1 and 2, geometry, pre-calculus, probability, statistics, and more. The field house at Champlain Park High School is going to be the place to be on April 12th, Saturday, April 12th, as Anoka-Hennepin's Indian Education Program hosts a powwow in partnership with neighboring school districts. The event is free and open to the public. I know many board members have attended in the past. Doors open at 11 and grand entry is at 1 p.m. with a community feast at 5 p.m. The event will feature native vendors, informational breakout sessions such as hoop dance classes and drum teachings, along with special dance performances throughout the day. Anoka-Hennepin has 5 educators who were nominated in the field of 142 educators running for the Minnesota Teacher of the Year Award. The candidates include Andrea Puder, kindergarten teacher at Sunrise Elementary; Katie Hauser, music teacher at Roosevelt Middle School; Kate Tverberg, math teacher at Andover High School; Rebecca Thomas, world language teacher at Blaine High School; and Ted Erickson, special ed teacher at Blaine High School. And of these candidates, Ted Erickson has advanced on to the semifinalist round. So just a congratulations to all the nominees this year, and the 61st Minnesota Teacher of the Year will be announced on May 4th. And finally tonight, the district will be hosting an in-person hiring event for operational and student support positions Thursday, March 27th from 3:30 to 5:30 at Anoka High School. The hiring event will take place in the atrium located near the main entrance of the school. So we encourage people to come and learn about employment opportunities and have a same-day on-site interview for various positions. So participants are encouraged to complete an application ahead of time, and the location or our website for that is ahschools.us/jobs, and come prepared to interview with hiring managers. Full-time, part-time, and substitute positions are available, including flexible weekly schedules with hours ranging from early morning, midday, late afternoon, or evening opportunities. So again, visit ahschools.us/jobs or call 763-506-JOBS for more information. So Chair DeShane, with that concludes my superintendent's report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent McIntyre. Board members, do you have any questions for the superintendent? Okay. Our next agenda items are several resolutions brought forward by Employee Services. The first agenda item is 7A, the resolution relating to the non-renewal of teaching contracts of probationary teachers, as presented in Appendix J. We welcome Dr. Jennifer Cherry, Executive Director of Human Resources.
Thank you, Chair DeShane. Members of the board, Superintendent McIntyre, this is the time of year where we are reconciling our annual staffing process. Each year we staff for the needs within our schools based on our student population and our enrollment. As that enrollment shifts from grades to grade, classroom to classroom, students are registered for different types of classes. We have a lot of shifts in the classrooms that we are staffing for. And so the first resolution that you have in your packet today in Appendix J, item 7A, is a resolution relating to the non-renewal of teaching contracts of probationary teachers. We have a list of 194 teachers on this list. Probationary teachers are non-renewed for a variety of reasons. It may be a reduction in student enrollment. It may be the financial condition of the school district. And there are other appropriate reasons where we may need to non-renew one of these probationary teachers. And with that, the recommendation is to approve the resolution as presented.
Board members, are there any questions for Dr. Cherry on this resolution? If not, members, before us is a resolution relating to the non-renewal of teaching contracts of probationary teachers, as presented in Appendix J. Hearing no request for discussion, would the clerk please call the roll?
Simon votes aye. Hoekman.
Aye.
Audette.
Aye.
Langenfeld.
Aye.
Arco.
Aye.
DeShane.
Aye. With 6 in favor and 0 opposed, the resolution in Appendix J is adopted. Next is 7B.
Thank you. And with this resolution, and it is Appendix K in your packet, it is a resolution relating to the non-renewal of teaching contracts of either Tier 1 or Tier 2 teachers. These are teachers that are on contracts that are short-term in nature. As you know, the Minnesota has a tiered licensure system. Tiers 1 through 4 Tier 1 and Tier 2 are short-term licenses, and what we consider a long-term or a fully licensed teacher is a Tier 3 or a Tier 4 teacher. So with all Tier 1 teachers, it is an annual process, and a Tier 2 teacher may have 2 years under that, but they do have very limited terms. And as such, we have a list of 82 teachers in front of you that are either on a Tier 1 or a Tier 2 teacher contract at this time, or teaching under a Tier 1 or a Tier 2 license at this time. Those names are presented to you, and as well as a resolution to non-renew these teaching contracts.
Members, any questions for Dr. Cherry on this resolution? Okay, if not, members, before us is a resolution relating to the termination and non-renewal of teaching contracts on Tier 1 or Tier 2 teachers as presented in Appendix K. Hearing no requests for discussion, would the clerk please call the roll?
Simon votes aye. Hoekman.
Aye.
Audette.
Aye.
Langenfeld. Arco.
Aye.
DeShane.
Aye. With 6 in favor and 0 opposed, that resolution in Appendix K is adopted. Next is item 7C.
And the next item is Appendix L in your packet, a resolution relating to the non-renewal of principal contracts of probationary principals. Similar to the first presentation, persons as probationary principals in Anoka-Hennepin may be non-renewed based on a reduction in student enrollment or the financial conditions of the district or other appropriate reasons. And as such, we are recommending non-renewal of the 3 principal contracts listed on Appendix L. So before you see a resolution, we're recommending.
Members, any questions for Dr. Cherry on this resolution? Okay. Members, before us is a resolution relating to the non-renewal of principals and assistant principals as presented in Appendix L. Hearing no request for discussion, would the clerk please call the roll?
Simon votes aye. Hoekman.
Aye.
Audette.
Aye.
Langenfeld. Arco.
Aye.
DeShane.
Aye. With 6 in favor and 0 opposed, that resolution in Appendix L is adopted as well. Thank you for being with us today, Dr. Cherry.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item, members, is Finance, item 8A, the amended budget second read for approval tonight. We welcome Michelle Vargas, Chief Financial Officer. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair DeShane, Superintendent McIntyre, members of the board. As you just said, I am here for the second read and looking for approval of our mid-year budget amendment for our fiscal year 24-25. To start with this, again, I said this was our mid-year adjustment. Depending on grants and other items that come through, there may be a final one to do a final one just before the end of the fiscal year for a final cleanup. Those are generally our one-time items. The mid-years, generally your pupil units and any ongoing changes that you are looking at current year trends or based on prior year. Now that we've closed the books, we hadn't closed the books when we adopt the budget, so you're making those changes as you're seeing that. We are not making any changes to the food service, the debt service, and trust funds. So this is going to be for your general fund, community ed, and our capital projects fund. Overall, the budget adjustment that we are making and proposed is a $20 million increase in revenue and $15.4 million increase in expenditures. Almost all of this is in the general fund. We are making slight changes to community ed and capital projects. So overall, a 2.8% increase in revenue and 2.1% increase in expenditures. For the general fund, a large change is due to our projected pupil units. So after our October 1 enrollment came in, and then our final adjusted pupil units for last year. So we look at how we started and what we trended to at the end. used the similar kind of trajectory for the current year, and that adjustment brought us down by 449 pupil units for our projected year-end adjusted pupil units. Our revenue increase is 20.2 million. Again, most of the adjustment is in the general fund, or 3.1%, and expenditures are 15.7%, or 15.7 million, 2.4%. Our projected ending general fund balance is 146 million, with 57.5 million of that being in the unassigned, which is then at 10.8%. And we'll see on future slides the change from what we adopted, where we were projected at, and now where we are projecting to be now. For the revenue side, that 20.1 million has to do with a state aid increase of 9 million. 3.5 million is actual reduction in the general aid area due to the reduction in pupil units. 3 million is on the basic formula, and then we have a bunch of other categorical that are also based on pupil units, which listed, we have operating capital, staff development, learning and development, talent development, the library aid, long-term facilities aid, and achievement integration all have pupil unit components in their calculation. Special education reimbursement is increasing by 8.7 million. So once they close out all of CEDRA at the end of November and the final expenditures in order to put out what the expected increases are, or revenue, they don't come out until late February in order to see what that, so we are adjusting for that 8.7 million in revenue based on prior year expenditure increases and increase for the, you have a 1-year lag on your cross subsidy because you don't get the revenue for the next year. We have an increase in endowment revenue, that's the land trust revenue, and it was just the increased payment based on investment earnings in that management of that land trust. 810,000 increase in compensatory revenue, our 710,000 increase in that between-term unemployment revenue. So we're scheduled to be reimbursed for our actual expenditures until that one-time funding runs out. And that was the increase to get to the 2.1 million that we've had out there for the year. 634,000 increase in our English learner revenue, and that's based on the number of students we're serving. So then again, waiting for last year's numbers to come in and rolling those forward. And then a slight increase for our student support personnel revenue of 221,000. Continuing on within the revenue, we also have 600,000 increase for our integration transportation reimbursement. So that's based on prior year expenditures where we were at last year. We assume we're going to be similar this year. So that increase is there. Non-public transportation reimbursement was $125,000 increase. And then we have a reduction in the literacy aid revenue. So based on last year, we made that reduction. The property tax increase is a shift. So when you adopt next year's tax levy, which we did in December, there are 2 levies in there that revert back. And that's the unemployment, because you're making estimates on it for the current year, and your career and tech. Career and tech is based on what you expect your current year expenses are. So it's part of an accounting. So at the point in time when we're adopting the budget, we don't know what the next year's estimates are. And then it's a shift that you're required to recognize actually in the current year, even though the levy comes the next year. So just trying to explain what that means. And it isn't because our taxes changed. It's just that's how you have to recognize it once you adopt it. The last one's the big one, and we talked about this last time. The change in the cross-subsidy of English learners, that amount, we will get a cross-subsidy starting in fiscal year 27. We get 25% of the cross-subsidy. In fiscal year 25, we need to start reporting that cross-subsidy. So we have to make sure all of the expenses that we had, which we've been coding in basic skills, comp ed, the EL portion, and then the rest in compensatory, we're short that almost 4 million. Between the 4 million in revenue, we spend over 15 million or 14.5 million. So what we'll end up doing is we have to make this entry, an expenditure side of a transfer in on the revenue and a transfer out on the expenditure. They're equal to each other. It's not like a real expenditure, it's an accounting entry in order to recognize it for the state, for them to see the difference. So although on our expenses, it will look like our expenses went up, it'll also look like our revenue goes up, but it's an offsetting entry, so there's no effect on your fund balance. On the expenditure side, we have a $15.7 million increase. $3 million is for the increase in special ed contracted services. So again, we're looking at our existing staffing, the contracted that we've had out, the increase in special ed students that we've seen this year. So that was that, where we're at. $710,000 is the increase on the between-term unemployment expenses, what we've seen for the July-August term of those, and that is reimbursed. $1.2 million increase was the paraeducators contract settlement that you settled after we adopted the budget, and then the $346,000 for the office professionals contract settlement will be for this year. Again, we see the transfer out of the $10.4 million for that accounting entry for the English learners. That's the transfer outside the expenditure side. This slide just shows the kind of the side-by-side of all the changes that we're making in the general fund and looking at which items have a revenue and an expense side to it. Most of them are on the revenue side with all of the adjustments that just have to do for pupil units. We didn't make adjustments necessarily for this, we've already allocated budgets and we're based on what our original estimates are. Once pupil units come in, the revenue adjusts. You can see that the special ed item, we see a $8.7 million increase and a $3 million increase on the expenditure side. And then the very one at the bottom, that $10.4 million shows the in and the out. Overall, we're looking at then operating deficit of $16.4 million. On the next slide, when we show it with all of our revenues and expenditures by the different categories, again, we also have our strategic investments that are in those expenditures, which are one-time expenses. So that reduces our adjusted deficit from that 16 million down to 7 million. So that's kind of, we keep track of that. We always look at our unassigned. Our unassigned is that's kind of our savings account, that threshold of the 10% that you set. We had projected it to be at 9.8. These adjustments now have it at 10.8 or 10.8% with the 57.5 million. Again, the projected, the proposed increase is that 20 million of 3.1%, and then the 2.4% on the expenditures, with the majority of it being that English language learners adjustment. The next slide is all of our fund balances, all the required reserves, which are the bottom restricted, the assigned, where we carry the different assigned balances for the board and approved strategic investments. We used to have QComp up in the assigned. The state just made it a restricted this year, so we switched it down to restricted. We've always tracked QComp because of it, and even though the state didn't recognize it, we were only allowed to spend it on that, so if we had a reserve, we needed to. This year, they happened to start with a deficit, and that will be made up over time. But as you can see in that very top right-hand corner, when we talk about what our operating deficit or surplus, because there are some other ins and outs in the different reserves, it's basically $6 million. So we are operating at a deficit this year of $6 million if everything happens exactly the way that we say it. Estimate it to. Other than that, you can see in the assigned, that's that 9.4 million that we're spending within strategic investments that has textbooks in there and has many building things. The Dayton and Franklin finishing up this past summer, we're all in there for those items. So overall, spend down of 16.4 million, the majority of that being in strategic investments. But a lower hit on our unassigned, that also leaves us at a higher, we're still projected to be at our 10%. If there aren't any questions on the general fund, I'll move on to the community ed fund. The community ed fund, we have some minor adjustments. Overall, we're looking at a revenue increase of 118,000 or 0.4%. On this page, these are all increases. School readiness is going up 138,000 due to program implementing some income verifications, which resulted in fewer discounted enrollments. There's a 100,000 increase in adult basic ed, which is local grants and having higher contact hour driven. So that's seat driven program of our adult learners actually in a seat getting instruction. The $125,000 increase in central service is due to additional interest earnings. So after our last year, they've upped, they get a portion. When we allocated, all of our cash is sitting together earning it, but based on cash balances throughout the year, it's allocated out to the funds that have cash balances. So they're upping their investment earnings in the community ed fund. $40,000 increase in non-public and homeschool, which is due to their increased student count that are being served in that. These ones are all decreases on this page. $120,000 decrease in facilities revenue. That had to do with our Phase 2 budget realignment. So there was a holdback for community ed that managed all of our facility rentals, and that's going to stay in the general fund. Community ed will no longer keep that for management. $104,000 decrease in Adventures Plus childcare revenue due to lower than budgeted enrollment. $38,000 decrease in facility monitor revenue, just originally over projected for the amount that they thought they would collect in monitor revenue with facility rentals. $10,000 decrease in aquatics lesson revenue due to reduced pool availability, and then a $13,000 decrease in just other program revenue adjustments. On the expenditure side for community ed, a very minor adjustment of $29,000 or 0.1%. $210,000 increase in school readiness and ECFE due to additional positions and wage adjustments and some one-time capital. $50,000 increase in parent involvement expenditures. This again was due to Phase 2 budget alignment and how we are managing the parent involvement expenditures. There was a general fund and a community ed shared position, and community ed took the position on fully in their fund. $40,000 increase in enrollment-driven homeschool. That's kind of the revenue, the expenditure side to the revenue for the increase in homeschool expenditures. $268,000 decrease in Adventures Plus. That was mirroring the revenue for the lower enrollment, so you have lower expenditures for payroll and non-payroll items. And a $3,000 decrease in other programs and adjustments. So again, just like the general fund, community ed, you have more of a increase and decrease, as most of their programs are revenue-based and enrollment-based and fee-based, so it's a different object than the general fund. And overall, as you can see, it is a very minor adjustment of less than 1% on either side, and a net operating balance of $235,000 and a fund balance of $9.5 million. Again, on the next slide, the tables where we look at our actual fund balance and the revenues and expenditures by categories, 0.4% increase in the revenue and 0.1% in the expenditures. As you can see, over the 3 years, they're right in line, that 9.8 million, 9.5 million, sitting at around 31%, which is pretty common for a primarily fee-based fund. Then the last fund this is the wrap-up of the 2017 Fit for the Future Capital Projects Fund. We are wrapping up all of the final projects and getting back some of the escrow accounts with the cities that we have in order to close that out. In order to do that, when we adopted it, we were basing on where we thought it was going to finish last year, so the timing of bills and that change it. So we still have some money that we have invested, so we need to increase our revenue by $90,000 due to the additional investment revenue, and then we are decreasing our expenditures by $277,000 due to the available funds after the final closeout. Projected fund balance will be zero. We expect to have this done, and we will no longer have a capital projects fund until we have another capital project season at that time. So as you can see, we are looking at $110,000 for the budget, the increase of $90,000, and then reducing our expenditures from $4.1 million to $3.89 million, and expected to be done with all of that and complete closeout at the end of this fiscal year. So what I have before you is a proposal to amend the fiscal year 24-25 budget to $737.6 million revenue and $758 million expenditure budget, 2.8% increase on our revenues and 2.1% increase on expenditures. And I will open it up to any comments and questions.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions for Ms. Vargas? Okay. If not, members, before us is our fiscal year '25. Director Audette.
I didn't have any questions, but I did just have a comment.
Sure.
So when we originally passed this budget, I didn't vote for it due to the objections that I had to any number of things that I highlighted. We talked about a lot, but I'm still at the same place with it. So I wanted to thank Ms. Vargas because, as she always does, she puts forth a clearly, as clear of an understandable budget as you can get. It gets more understandable the longer you sit in one of these chairs, but my read on it is we're probably ending with these adjustments about as well as I would think we can, maybe with the exception being the decline in enrollment, which I do think is probably worth us taking a look at again. But all of that said, so I don't find any issue with the budget itself as it's prepared, but I'm not going to vote for the amended budget on the same principle that I didn't vote for the original budget. And I would just add that many of the things that I raised as objections, going back now a year ago, they have now been, they've been somewhat litigated in the public square through the most recent national election, and they were defeated pretty soundly. As a result, the president has now put out a number of executive orders that he has said if public schools don't comply with, they risk federal funding. So at a recent work session, we heard about it. And for us, it could be as much as $29 million in federal funding that we put at risk to the extent that we continue to have programming in here that now could be in violation of those executive orders. So my point really is we have a chance as we come forward into the next budget cycle to do what I think is responsible for a number of reasons, but has now added, I think, emphasis with the fact that up to $30 million could be at risk for us to the extent we continue it. So it's my hope that when we look to the next cycle, we could take a look at any of these things that we're doing voluntarily that are not required. Of course, we've talked about some issues with state laws mandating certain things, so we could probably put some of that out of scope. But the things that we do voluntarily, and we know they're here, we could take a look at in order to protect the community, protect our schools, and the $30 million that could be at risk, which would, of course, layer on to millions that were already in deficit. So I guess it's just a thought going forward and how I'll vote tonight. Thanks.
Members, any other discussion? Director Hoekman.
Thank you. For many of the same reasons, I am also voting no on this amended budget. Just to make it clear that I don't support the kind of programming that doesn't focus on improving academic performance such as literacy, math skills, and STEM. It's time to put proven evidence-based learning ahead of costly, untested, unconventional ideologies that risk federal dollars that we can't afford to lose. Thank you.
Director Arco.
Thank you, Chair DeShane. So yeah, I think Director Audette said it pretty much spot on. I agree with the sentiment that he's expressing. I think we should halt the voluntary things that we're doing and, like you said, kind of put out of scope the stuff that is required by state for another time. That being said, I do plan on voting for this amended budget. I passed the budget last year, and I think it's appropriate to stay the course, so.
Thank you. Director Simon?
Thanks, Casey. So, we talked about this in depth at the work session. Unfortunately, that's not televised for the public to see. And I know that out on social media, I think there were some very misleading descriptions of that discussion. So let me just say it in open meeting right here. I am for looking at all of those things too. There weren't just 3 board members, there are at least 4 and maybe more that were okay to do that. I would say that I continue to hear that there's all kinds of things within our budget that would go against President Trump's executive orders or what have you. I don't believe that's the case. So I've mentioned to specific board members, and I'm mentioning it to all board members right now. Come to me and tell me what those specifics are, and I will work with you. So that's all I'll say about that. Thanks.
Any other discussion? Director Langenfeld?
Thank you. I think as we look to the budget coming up, it's very important that we look at the things that are our priorities. It's going to, and it's in taking ideology out of it and just looking at the things that really focus on what Director Hochman was saying around our priorities. I don't know what those are. Specifically, I've thought about them, I've looked for them. I actually spent several hours since our last meeting really looking at policy to see if they are in there. I've had some conversations as well. So I think that as we look to cost savings and things that are very important, and we're looking at millions of dollars in budget cuts and hundreds of teachers out of classrooms being reduced, I think we have to really look very carefully at what the budgets are telling us and where those areas are that we can create greater efficiencies. I like to look at it that way. I did not see a great deal in policy, and so I think it's really important that we have clarification in putting dollar signs out there that we could lose. I'm not sure. I'm assuming that's the special ed funding that you were referencing in the 30 million, because you can come up with a lot of figures, and I just would caution us to really have the conversations first before we put out dollars. I just really think that's important to our public to be as transparent as possible with the budgets that we currently have and the budget that we are going to need to have going forward to address the budget shortfall, which is quite significant, and gaining more traction of the possibility of even more. So lots of moving parts. I think we have to be really mindful. And as our legislators, I've attended in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, time with legislators who are now putting out their budget, and the governor came out with his budget that will potentially be impacting us even greater. So again, for me, it's looking for any efficiencies that we can gain and focus on priorities around literacy and math and the priorities around behavior and so forth that we have established. I think it's vitally important we take that step together. Looking forward to how we will have that process and do that.
Yeah, I think, Co-Chair Arco, go ahead.
You can.
I didn't know if yours was related to that, if you wanted to carry on before I moved us. Okay. I think, members, as we've talked about this over the past year, specifics matter, right? We've asked for specifics. Director Audette, you gave a list of specifics, and we've spent months, days, hours in meetings, extra meetings, talking about all of those, and found some areas of compromise and some areas of further investigation that has been ongoing and continuing work on the administrative team here at the district. I think we've all committed and been aligned to finding ways to focus on the academic needs of students in our district, the achievement of students, and what students need to be successful in our district. That includes things that we still need to talk about, right, that have not come back up to a discussion for compromise, even though alternative ideas have been presented, including 20-some-plus-year-old physics curriculum books that we're waiting on. Social studies curriculum, we've got some of that in the pipeline, but we've got a lot of important work ahead of us to talk about, and the really, really hard work of these budget concerns that are coming to us from all kinds of different places, including our own decisions, right, that we've made here at this board table to increase contracts pay for our important staff. And if we continue to be distracted by non-specifics and kind of cultural war topics without going into what we're talking about, we're not doing our students a service. So, like Director Simon, please, if there are specific examples, let's talk about what those are so that we can actually make some headway on this topic instead of recycling it over and over again. Director, or Coach Arkell?
So at the work session, I did provide at least what I thought was one specific related to the underlying philosophy of how we deal with student behavior. I think is driven by, if I'm recalling this correctly, I think I said it was restorative justice practices and equity-based ideas. So to answer the question that the two of you posed, to just give another example I think is pertinent. Some of the things that you're asking for will be like very specific, like you can point to it, put your finger on it, like the equity achievement plan. Most of what I'm actually concerned with are what I would describe to be derivatives of, let's say, DEI. So there's not going to be some program or poster that I can point to and say that right there, but it's underlying philosophies and systems that are put in place that operate on DEI principles, but are not, in the truest sense, specifically DEI themselves. So to give an example, we discussed this one a while back, standards-based grading. Just to give the really quick explanation, my understanding is rather than the traditional like A, B, C, D, F grading scheme, it's a numbered scheme like 4, 3, 2, 1. We did have a presentation on it, so the board got to learn the basics of it. I've also talked to various teachers about it. As it currently stands, it's causing a lot of confusion and frustration both for teachers and parents in the district, because when parents have, a student that has one class that uses standards-based grading and one that uses traditional grading, it's just confusing. I know, same thing for teachers, it's a lot to use sometimes multiple grading schemes or to have to learn one, and then it's not even implemented fully. And also at the same time, I know that grading systems and grading schemes are very near and dear to teachers, and it's something that they take great pride in. I think we should give that ability back to them. And the reason I bring up standards-based grading is because while it is not DEI, it is driven by the philosophy of equity in that, and here's the specific. My understanding is that even if you get a 1, you still pass the class. That's as low as you can get. Now, I think it is perhaps possible to get a 0, but the only way you can do that, if I'm recalling this correctly, is essentially just not show up to class. So you just have to not show up. So you can know virtually none of the material, but provided you're just in the chair, you're going to pass the class. With a 1, but you're still passing the class. The idea of passing someone despite them not being able to demonstrate, the ability to do or demonstrate knowledge in what was taught, that is equity. So standards-based grading is a derivative of equity. And that's a specific thing that I think we should get rid of is standards-based grading, make it uniform, put it back to the teachers, make it clear and easy to understand. And the reason I think this is such an easy one to compromise on is because, while not every board member might be in support of getting rid of standards-based grading, or stated another way, they might like it. Yeah, without actually asking you guys directly, I would suspect that no one is necessarily opposed to traditional grading. It's not like you view the board members who are not in support of getting rid of standards-based grading. It's not as though, my understanding at least, is that you're like categorically against traditional grading, in the same sense that like I am categorically against using standards-based grading. So I think it is bad. I think it's degrading the classroom. I think it's not useful. I think it's masking a problem. I definitely want to get rid of it. I don't, again, correct me if I'm wrong, I just don't feel like that sentiment exists for traditional grading. So in the absence of a strong opposition to traditional grading, it would make sense for the board to transition back to that, in my opinion. But either way, that is a very specific thing. I'm not going to belabor the point and mention more. I could keep going, but that's to just provide one specific and to kind of answer the question that you guys posed.
All right, members, any further discussion? Director Simon.
So I know we're not going to get into, or shouldn't get into specific issues here, but I'm just going to make comments about your standards-based grading comment, because my understanding of standard-based grading is completely different than yours. And the caution of coming to a public meeting and saying an opinion as opposed to fact, I think, and I won't go into that because my reading too, is that now the public has an idea in their head of what standards-based grading is, which we've had presentations on that, and it didn't match up to what you just said at all. So I think there's a caution in that. But I will say my understanding of standards-based grading is we've stopped it. So in secondary, we are no longer continuing forward with standards-based grading. We are allowing teachers that have implemented it to high fidelity and like it, to continue doing it, and other teachers who are doing what you call traditional. That's my understanding of what we're doing. So even though I think standards-based grading, when done really well, I don't think that we've done it well in secondary, at least in Anoka-Hennepin. So I'm fine not doing that. So I just wanted to say that so the public heard maybe a different view, but my understanding is we are not going forward with further implementation in secondary. Maybe the superintendent can correct me if I'm mistaken.
The agreement of the board last year was to pause on any new implementation. CTs and teachers that are effectively implemented can continue. It's right in the notes from number 2. Of the 10 items the board spent hours discussing last spring before this last budget. So happy to dust that off and resend that. I, like you, need clarity. And I need to, I've been honoring the agreements of this board to have a process follow, provided the time we need, follow the law, and get to a majority of the board for direction. So that's what I'm asking of you, and that's, I think, what you've all committed to throughout the last year up to this point. And I guess I'd just add, too, if I can, Dr. Langenfeld and I were with 6 legislators today alone. The governor's budget has up to between $15 and $20 million of additional cuts that we're going to have to sort out, in addition to the $14 million or so that we have already identified with the help of Ms. Vargas. So we need clarity because we're going to have some tough decisions. Now, we'll see where we'll land at the end of the session. And we've been there at the legislature talking about the impact of those kinds of things. And that may not be where we land at hopefully May or June, hopefully not at the end of the summer. Those are the things that are, really being reviewed very carefully. But at best, it's going to be worse than what we initially projected. So I need your help with clarity, right? We can't be in May and June or, and not having agreement because we have to land our budget on time and we have to notify our staff because those cuts are going to really be in the form of people, primarily with our 80% of our budget being staff. So that's my ask of the board. Yeah, so I'm asking you to help me with that.
All right, thank you all. So members, before us is our fiscal year 25 amended budget for approval as presented in Appendix M. Is there a motion to approve the fiscal year 25 amended budget as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Director Langenfeld. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Director Simon. Any further discussion? Would all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
Nay.
With 4 in favor and 2 opposed, the amended budget is passed.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, board members, the next agenda item is what we have added at the beginning of our agenda setting time this evening, talking about the addition of a boys volleyball B squad. Co-Chair Arco, since you added it to the agenda item, would you like to begin with any commentary before we move into discussion with the rest of the board?
Yep, thank you for that. So my apologies for making the motion mid-motion. That was an error on my part. Kind of what I'd stated, based on some communications I've had with just staff in the district who are involved in volleyball, it sounds like there's already a roster of students who would play on the team if it were available. It also, if it's going to happen, it has to happen now. Otherwise, it'll have to wait till next year. So there's really no more time to delay if a decision were desired. And then, again, correct me if I'm wrong here, I believe Corey had thrown out a high number of perhaps $20K for additional costs. It's just my opinion that I'm confident that low cost could be offset by, again, non-human costs in the same way that we did that with the VSC restructuring. So I'm in favor of it. And like I said, I think I voted with you guys on the pool closure, and the cost that we're saving on that, I believe, is far in excess of what it would cost to add the B squad volleyball team. So I just strongly encourage board members to vote yes on this.
Director Langenfeld.
Thank you, and this is a really important topic, and the timing is concerning to me because I have a lot of questions. When we received a brilliantly written, thoughtful request, it came from one school, and my concerns were, what are the other schools thinking? Do they have the same capacity? Do they have the same resources? Are there numbers available? You know, do we have the numbers? Is there gym time? Can we get coaches and all of those things? Because I think that those are things, as a former administrator, that just rushed through my mind, because I really thought that it's an important conversation to have. And so the response that I thought I received from Superintendent was $100,000. So I would assume that means 5 schools at 20,000. And my wonderment, and it says that we can charge them for the season, but we're already in the season. You know, so I'm not, and then there's a question of whether or not they have capacity gym space. If I'm understanding this right, that some things got canceled, but maybe they could. That's my real concern, because I know we approved this, I think in August, if I'm not mistaken. And so I'm just looking at that, and I have to look to the superintendent and ask those kinds of questions, because I don't know where the other high schools are with this. I can tell you one school has really done an amazing job, and it's, you know, when I received that, I sent a response right away to Casey and said, I'd love to do this. I'd love to do this, but I don't even know what, you know, it sounded like they had it all figured out at almost zero cost. And so then the question became, where are the other folks at, and what are the ADs and principals saying? So I'll just stop at that, but I know it was very thoughtfully put together in response to great enrollment at that particular school, but I don't know what the numbers are at the other schools either, so that's my wonderment. And the other piece that kept coming through, and correct me if I'm wrong, is their club, weren't they playing like club volleyball? So there would be an opportunity. I know it was referenced, there's a league out there that some students could play in, but could they play in a club situation? So I'll stop. I just need way more information, unfortunately.
Did you want to respond to that, or should we go to other members first? Superintendent McIntyre? Okay. Okay, Director Audette, go ahead.
A couple things. One, I think just with respect to the club, based on the discussion I had with the folks in the Booster Club at Andover, the clubs are more or less disintegrating, as most schools in the state have moved to a varsity sport. So then that club thing it's very much limited in the scope. That's part of the problem, is that they're finding that the kids that didn't make the varsity they really don't have the good opportunity to participate anymore. And so I think that's part of what's really driving it. And the other, I think, is just as you move forward to the varsity sport, being able to have those kids stay in the program is part of what is going to lead to as many kids participating as possible, and then, you know, being competitive. So I think you've asked good questions, Dr. Langenfeld, but I guess I would just say, for me, this, especially based on what we got sent in through the booster groups and the number of kids participating, which is really great, this one feels to me very much like a good thing for kids. And it's really no more complex than that for me as far as that goes. So I feel pretty strongly we should find a way to make this happen. So I'm in support of it.
Director Simon?
Thanks, Casey. I might be kind of where Michelle is. I don't think, you know, I didn't know this was coming forward. I'm not sure if others did, so I'm not prepped for it at all. And I think I've mentioned to folks before that I do a lot of prep in the background to try to figure out these things, so I don't know if I'd be able to vote tonight. I did, when Zach first made it at the beginning of the meeting, I went back because I remembered an email that we all had an exchange email about if we were going to do this, and it was back on 3/13, so 2 weeks ago, and it did talk $100,000 of added cost. So again, I think you're right. I think it's probably $20,000 per high school would be my guess. And the admin recommendation at that time was similar to back in August when we approved it, is that starting with JV and varsity is kind of a process that we followed before for other sports that we've added, such as lacrosse. We started with that in the first year and then expanded in future years, which seemed to be a reasonable thing and was reasonable when we voted on it in August. I think that, if I have to vote tonight, the thing that would make me say stay the course of what we did is that the ADs gave, so beyond administrative recommendation, our ADs gave the following information about how it would be challenging for them to add a B squad. And that was 11 days ago, and they said timing is the big thing, like right now, back on 3/13 when the season started. So this, I think, would even be more of a challenge. They talked about high schools have already taken the steps of canceling lower-level games, signed contracts for tournaments with JV and varsity games only, issued uniforms and volleyballs. It would be, back on 3/13, it was a tight turnaround to get those supplies as needed. And then the biggest thing, those were all obstacles but not roadblocks back 2 weeks ago. Maybe they're roadblocks now. But the biggest thing they talked about was, again, 11 days ago, being able, the time and for the staffing to post and repost and get coaching positions. It sounded, at least in that email to me, that it was almost next to impossible 11 days ago. So I would think it might be impossible now. So I think that without added information or added time to be able to look into this, I am all for more participation for students and opportunity for students. I think that's why we added volleyball in the first place, and I'm for an expansion, but especially with the ADs, the people on the site telling us that these are either big challenges or maybe even impossibilities, I'm not ready to vote yes tonight.
Any other comments, members? Director Hoekman?
It's definitely a challenging situation with the timeline. And implementing new programs takes time and insight, and there's many challenges. I also think that giving students opportunities is really what we're here to do, to make certain that we get successful kids educated for their future. And I think that participation in sports is part of that. So as I'm looking at it, I wonder, I'm going to vote to support such a measure because I would hope that the ADs, if they're able to make it work, they can make it work. And if they find that they can't find staffing, maybe that building it doesn't move forward. So I just really trust in the ability of our staff to think creatively and hopefully find some opportunities for kids.
Coach Jericho?
Yeah, so to address, I believe, at least one of the points you brought up, Director Simon, so regarding like time slots or certain costs for like referees, the idea was put forward that the referee, and again, I'm just repeating what I had read, so the referees, they're contracted for, I believe it's a certain time slot or a certain amount of games, and like the varsity game, for example, might only last so long, so they could theoretically do a second game, but there's nothing slotted for that, so the B squad could take up that kind of secondary time slot. So that would mitigate against some of the costs. Just a thought. And then, yeah, I think Linda stated it correctly. Maybe it doesn't work, maybe there's not enough time, but even if it works in 1 of 5 schools, okay, I'd more than happy to give them the go-ahead and give them the resources to get it off the ground. And if some schools can't do it or don't want to, that's totally fine as well. So I would just feel bad to not give them the opportunity if they had the list of students ready to go and the staff who were like willing to implement this and put it in place. If they want to do it and they can do it, I say go for it and let it be their concern.
Director Langenfeld?
I'm struggling with not all the information. I keep going back to the fact that we don't know which schools can do what, where, in terms of access. And so my question is, are you proposing, I don't know who the team would play, unless you're proposing intramural kind of support. I mean, college kids are in intramurals, that kind of thing. So then what would prevent that from them playing in that kind of in a school? I'm just, because I think it's important for the kids to play. If they have the gym space, why couldn't they do that? But that's not a B squad. That's not an official school team. So I'm not sure. I know that one school has thought it through very carefully. I don't know how the other ones feel. I don't know how many extra kids came out. I think we read over 40. Some kids at Andover can't necessarily make the team or be there available. I think that's what I read. So I understand that concern there, and the support for those kids, the kids at Andover. I'm just curious if we have any numbers for other schools even, and any feedback from, to the ADs. Again, I'm just not sure where they're at. And I feel it would be unfair if we could offer it at your school, you get to have it, and my student at another school maybe not be able to, unless they would take on other kids. I'm not sure what the plan would be. So I'm struggling with that.
Superintendent McIntyre.
So board members, this conversation started February 10th, and by March 13th, I shared the information with the co-chairs, asking for direction by March 17th, because that's when the season started. I didn't know this was coming forward tonight, so I can't answer those questions. A heads up on that would have been nice. So what you have is what I've given you 10 days ago, because I have not been able to ask those questions. It wasn't posed to me until we sat down this evening. Director Simon is correct. It's really not as much about the finances as it is about the logistics. All the other spring sports have started, right? This is about finding coaches. It's about all the rescheduling of games where we can, tournaments as well, uniforms, volleyballs. You read in that email the high schools were doing the work. They just need time. You made this decision months ago. So a week into the season's a challenge when they have all the other spring sports going. Now, if you say do what you can, I'm sure they will, right? It's not the process they would have asked for, I think. The kids that don't make JV or varsity can play JV Gold. Those options are there, but I'm sure it is fluid. I mean, this is new for every district this year, right? That's why we kind of modeled it after the lacrosse rollout, starting with JV and varsity, intentionally adding in the next level where we could plan ahead for it. We all share, we want as many kids to participate as possible. That's not a question. It was a matter of capacity and also being sensitive to the budget situation we're in as well, knowing that many more deeper cuts are coming, and adding sports while we're making staffing cuts is a challenging dilemma that we're in. But if the board decides to move forward, I think the best I can offer you right now is maybe those schools that could move quickly and do this, they have limited capacity. You know our ADs are already overwhelmed with all the other activities they're managing, but they will do the best they can if they have the flexibility to see if they can put it together and maybe get a partial season in place. That's probably the best I can suggest, because it'll take a little bit of time just to get it organized, find those coaches, make those adjustments, get all the materials and equipment that they need, and rework the schedules. And that doesn't happen overnight. But ultimately, what I heard from the board through the informal asking of the board members, I didn't hear a majority, so we didn't move it any further forward. And the last communication I think I got was around the 20th. So that's sort of why I think how we're in this awkward spot this evening, knowing that the recommendation on your prior board approval was to start with varsity and JV and then bring on B squad the following year. So whatever the board decides, we will do it wholeheartedly and do the best we can with what we have, knowing that it'll be a bit of a challenge logistically.
Director Simon.
As I hear and think more about this, I think back to that we're potentially creating chaos. And I think this board has done that before. We've made a decision and then gone back on a decision, and it's created chaos for our system. So I see potentially ADs, I see Andover having probably no trouble. They've done probably the background work. They have a very strong booster club. They could probably roll right into it. Whereas we're putting potentially some other ADs in our other 4 high schools in just a really difficult position. And that's our leadership doing that to them if we go forward with this. So without further information, I can't vote yes. I am fine if this does not pass tonight and we can get more information from ADs. I would be fine looking back at it again, but I think tonight there's just not enough information and there's too big of a risk of just, again, another example of pushing our system into chaos.
Director Hoagman.
Thank you. I think that this kind of exposes an issue that we have, a bigger issue, and why we're creating some chaos perhaps. And that's like polling behind the scenes and getting an idea that maybe there won't be support for an agenda item being brought forward. So then that agenda item isn't put on the agenda. So we never have the conversation necessary for us to determine what the right choice is. And that, I think, is probably a bigger problem here, is bring items forward that the board is interested in discussing so that we can actually discuss it, not eliminate them from being on the agenda because we think the votes won't support it. So just as we look forward in being a productive group, making wise decisions that will enhance education for our kids, we need to be more deliberate in making certain that we have discussions as a board.
Director Arco.
Solid gold, Linda. So funny enough, I had the same thought not too long ago. And so just to give my take as a new board member, never been on a board, I'm 1 year in, it has seemed strange to me, because if you think of the open meeting law, the intent is for board decisions to be made publicly for the public to witness, right? And work sessions aren't filmed, board meetings are. That's okay, I'm not saying work sessions should be filmed, but I had somebody tell me, and they're exactly correct on this, that if you want to see the real action, go to the work sessions, because that's where like the actual conversations take place. And they're correct. And I think just what I've come to conclude on this is it's kind of a shame, because as much as the board decisions matter, the reasoning behind the board decisions is arguably as important or more important. Like, I think the public wants and needs to know why we're doing what we're doing, not just that we're doing it. And speaking as a millennial, we live in the day and age where everything is digital now. If you give somebody the option of saying, hey, you want to, let's say you care about one of the agenda items out of 5 on a work session agenda, you can set aside your Monday night, drive somewhere, spend an hour or more, 2 hours, 3 hours, to hear that one conversation. It's a great inconvenience to you. And then nothing might even come of that decision. You're just hearing the why of it. Maybe that made sense years ago, but in the day and age we live in where everything is so easy to access online now, I think it's so much more important to have these conversations in the open, because you're going to get like 100x more engagement if the conversations like these take place in public, and like someone, instead of setting aside their Monday night, they can do it when it's convenient for them and just skip to the one conversation they wanted to see anyways and not have to listen to everything else. So that's just my take. I really think having these conversations in public is good. And also, and the goal is, what I'm about to say, I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes, but I'm just being honest. I think it's not a violation of the open meeting law. I don't think it is, but I think it's a violation of the spirit and the intent of the open meeting law to do kind of what Linda described, which is to filter these things out in advance rather than just having the discourse, having the discussion. Like, let's just have the discussion. Now it's on the record and people can watch it whenever they want. They can hear our take on it, and that's that. The board's going to do what the board's going to do. So I think it makes so much more sense to just give the public the option to just hear the actual genuine discussion that the board members are having, rather than us kind of having one-on-one or two-on-one discussions behind the scenes. So there's that. I love your thought on that, Linda. So back to the volleyball thing, just one last quick thought. I agree. There's the possibility of chaos, and it is clear that there's one school that's much more prepared for this than others. Yeah. So there's kind of there's two lenses you can choose to see this. Number one, we're creating chaos, and it's going to be hard logistically. That second part is going to be true no matter what. Or alternatively, you can view it as, to those that are ready and to those who want it, the board says, go ahead, we're going to give you the opportunity. And if it just doesn't work out for some schools, okay, I'm not saying you have to do it. I'm not saying we're going to stress you. Like, I'm not forcing any school to do it. But I guess what I'm hoping to get from this vote is to those schools who aren't interested, that have the roster ready to go, that clearly have a thought-out plan, and maybe it's only one school, maybe there's one who's considering it, but they haven't, because they didn't think it would happen, they just didn't bother with the details. But to those schools who are ready, just give them the option. And then if it works, it's on them to make it work, and if they can make it work, great. And if the board votes yes, and they decide after the fact, you know what, this isn't gonna work, we're not gonna do it, okay, I'm not compelling you to do it, I just wanna make sure you have the resources to do it if you want. And then for any other school who's interested, specifically to avoid chaos, again, this is a B squad team, and the season has already started. So even if they get half a season, if to avoid chaos, they delay a month and then manage to get into a league and have half a season, that's great, because now students get half a season, we don't have, I guess what I'm getting at is we talk a lot in board meetings about the difference between governance and management. And all I'm trying to say is to those schools who want to add the B squad team and who are willing to put in the work and plan out the details, go for it. That's my take. I'm not going to plan those details out for you. And honestly, even if I vote yes, even if the board votes yes and it doesn't work, okay, well, you gave it your best shot. That's the management part. I'm putting it on them to manage. But here's the key. I'm not compelling, and I'm not suggesting we compel anyone to do it. I'm just saying to those who are interested and to those who can, let's just make sure the resources are there so they can give it a shot. And I think it would be a shame to say no to everybody because not everybody can do it. It would be a shame to say no to those who are ready and to those who want to because we can't give it the same opportunity to everybody right now. And that second part isn't even a guarantee. I do have faith in the staff to make it happen if they so desire, but I just want to make it possible to those who want to do it. So that's where I stand on it.
Director Simon?
Yeah, I guess just two things to that. There is a governance piece that it's good leadership to give enough time to be able to successfully implement things. And I don't think we are here. The other thing is my understanding of this volleyball is it's important for every team to have a B squad so they have someone to play. Because our teams play each other. Yeah, they may play outside the conference too and may have a few games, but it's important for everyone to have one is my understanding of this without further information.
So I just want to add that I enjoy this type of collegial, mostly respectful conversation. I really wish that we could use these same skills on other topics specific to like academic achievement, curriculum adoptions, literacy, other things that we are focused on. In the time that we are in of budget cuts, we have already accounted for the cost savings of not repairing the pool. We can't account for it twice. The math doesn't work for that. I am going to steal a phrase from Jeff. Staying the course seems the most prudent option to me in my assessment of our financial situation and the fact that we did already put out an expense above and beyond our budget abilities to have varsity and JV start this year. I'm a huge supporter. I hope that's obvious every time that we sit at this table of our students' extracurricular activities, sports, academic, all of their extracurricular opportunities. And it pains me to not be able to give another option in that way, but it just is not fiscally responsible to do so in my estimation at this time. So that's my take. Any other discussion before Co-Chair Arco makes a motion? Director Langenfeld.
Yes, I think one of the things, and it goes back to wanting these conversations in public, when I think about this, had I known this was coming forward, I would have asked the questions I'm asking now. Because those are important questions for me to make sure, and everyone has said some really important kernels of truth that I think we can, look at. The information is really important to not create chaos. The information is very important so we can ensure opportunity for all kids, which I think is vitally important. And so then the question is it something that we can vote? Do we vote tonight, or do we try to get more information? I mean, and is it even possible to have a shortened season? Those are the kinds of things that we could have asked. And those are the things that, I wouldn't be opposed to that. Right now, I can't support it, but it's very difficult to say no because I'm saying no to something that I don't know. That's how it feels. When it came up tonight as a point, it's like, oh gosh, I wish I knew this and this and this and this. And I read carefully everything that I had. I was trying to read it, but I don't have all the other schools. That's my problem right now, is that I do not feel I have enough information to support it, but I truly don't have enough information to say no, if that makes sense.
Superintendent McIntyre.
Just maybe this, I think, is helpful. I mean, the board's previous decision was really the direction you gave the ADs, so to prepare for varsity and JV, and in essence, not prepare for a B squad season this year. So, they may or may not have all that information because they prepped for the two-team approach. I understand and believe this is true. They've already had tryouts and made cuts for varsity and JV. So they'll have to work backwards through that process. It's not that it can't be done. It's just, so my sense is they're going to support the best course of action is, move forward as planned versus really starting over during the season to make those adjustments. I know they will do whatever we direct them to do, and they'll do it as best they can, and they'll give it their best shot to do a really great job. So hopefully that's important, but this is, when you're 2 weeks in, roster decisions have likely been made by now. So just a piece I didn't mention earlier that came to mind as I listened to the board discuss it.
Thank you. Coach Arco, do you want to make your motion?
I motion that we vote to add a B squad volleyball team for, I guess, where applicable.
Thank you, Coach Arco. Do we have a second? Thank you, Director Audette. Any discussion? Hearing none, would all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
And all those opposed say nay? Nay. With 3 in favor and 3 opposed, the motion does not pass. All right, board members, we are nearing our last board agenda item, board correspondence and communication. Members, this is your opportunity to share happenings in your community, report on committee assignments, or any other items of interest. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share? Director Langenfeld.
I think the superintendent shared the fact that we were at the legislature today, learning more about the governor's budget and looking at the current reality that we're in terms of, where we will be able to go. There's a lot of work underway in certain spots, and a lot of things, as you well know, have reached places that are kind of non-starters. I think that the piece that is overarching, though, is the money is just not there. It's the message over and over that we cannot anticipate significant financial relief in any district. Recognition that schools are struggling right now. I would say there was recognition that there were mandates in our mandates that some can be addressed potentially. But from a fiscal perspective in fixing them, if that makes sense, where we have some of the mandates require us to do one thing and they were maybe funded for a period of time and no longer are sustainably funded, those kinds of things, there's concern there. So I think our legislators on both sides of the aisle have been really honest and straightforward with that. I know that there is some movement, I believe, on the Senate side to address our platform around student discipline and potentially extending the time that our schools can work with families and parents when a child is really struggling. And we really need that time to bring that parent in and make sure that parent voice is part of the solution for that child's well-being. So there's understanding and there is some support for that, I think, that potentially could move forward, which I think is a good thing. But as far as any kind of additional fiscal relief, I don't believe we can count on it. I think we're fortunate that we do have some cost of living increase. I don't know if that's what they're calling it on the CPI or whatever that we can potentially or can use for salaries. But other than that, in terms of addressing budget shortfalls, I think that's going to be very problematic for pretty much every school district across the state right now. They keep talking about it. The other piece, though, is that right now the governor's budget really puts us at a place where we have to have some deep conversation, I think, as a group at some point around, if it continues, around the comp ed pilot. And the compensatory pilot was put into place many years ago, taking into account that we have a number of students who would qualify for free and/or reduced lunch, but because the district runs economy of scale, I call it, where our buildings are large, even though, for example, we have more than 13,000 students who would qualify for free and reduced lunch. There are others, Minneapolis, I think, has more than a little over 16,000 students, and yet they get almost twice as much money. So that was an attempt by the state to provide some relief to make sure that the children that we are serving in Anoka-Hennepin also have resource. So this has been ongoing, but now it showed up as a potential cut, which we have to be mindful of, because that would be very devastating for our children, and it means a lot of staffing if it doesn't come through. And then the other piece, really looking at QComp and what that will do, which is a program that the district was able to put into place in partnership with former Governor Tim Pawlenty, and the commissioner at the time was Alice Seagren. When that was particularly brought in, Anoka-Hennepin brought that forward to lift up our teachers in terms of their skills and provide them with support, and then offer them a stipend basically for the work. So maybe I'm not characterizing that exactly, so I defer, but a lot of important conversation going on in that space.
Thank you. Members, anything else to report? No. I just have a quick thank you to all of our staff who take groups of students on trips over spring break. I know all of our different high schools and some of our middle schools partner with various programs to go to Washington DC or other places, the Kennedy Space Center. You know, they've got all kinds of really cool programming, and I know that that's a personal time commitment from those staff members. So just a heartfelt thank you to all of those staff members that are providing those opportunities to families. Anything else, members? Okay, our last agenda item is to adjourn. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you, Director Simon. Any discussion? Hearing none, would all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. With 6 in favor and 0 opposed, we are adjourned at 7:58 p.m.